The death of Patricia changed nothing about the battle. The Vorthen advanced. The humans retreated. The station burned in places and flooded in others. But something changed in the way the humans fought. They became harder, more ruthless, more focused on the goal instead of the cost. Victoria called another meeting in the command center. Now there were only 6 of the 7 around the table. Patricia's empty chair was visible to everyone. No one commented on it. No one acknowledged the loss directly, but everyone felt it. The mining operation in the southern section, Marcus said. His voice was steady, but his hands shook slightly. We can use it against them. Full collapse of the entire area. It would kill anything inside it. How many? Victoria asked. Roughly 400 Vorthen. Maybe more. Victoria nodded. Do it. An hour later, the southern section came down. The ground shook beneath the station. Dust filled the corridors. 400 Vorthen died. And 12 humans who were supposed to evacuate from that section died too. They had been cut off by Vorthen advance teams. They could not escape. They were caught in the collapse they had caused. James Cooper came back from an airstrike run with damage to his shuttle. He had been hit by Vorthen fire. The shuttle was losing pressure. He could not return to the hangar without the entire ship exploding and taking anyone below with him. So James did what his training told him not to do. He did what humans have been taught was suicide. He guided his damaged shuttle directly at the Vorthen landing bay. He aimed for the center of their transport vessels. He activated the detonation sequence and abandoned the cockpit just as the shuttle crashed. The explosion was enormous. The landing bay was destroyed. 15 Vorthen supply vessels went with it. But the explosion was also close enough to James that the impact knocked him unconscious. He should have died. By every medical calculation, his injuries should have been fatal. Multiple broken bones, internal bleeding, organ damage. Christine Park found him in the wreckage. She worked for 6 hours in conditions that were herself barely survivable. She stopped his bleeding. She splinted his broken bones. She gave him medications that humans had developed to keep the body alive in conditions where it should fail. 12 hours later, James woke up in the medical center. He was in pain. He could barely move, but he was alive. And the first thing he asked was whether the Vorthen were still advancing. They are regrouping, Victoria told him. Thanks to your run. They lost half their air support. Good, James said, because I can fly again in a few days. You will stay in medical, Christine said. She said it as an order, the way doctors did with humans who had temporarily lost their sense of reason. But 3 days later, James Cooper walked out of the medical center using a support frame. His injuries were not healed. His pain was not gone. But his legs worked, and that was enough. He returned to the hangar. He claimed another shuttle, and he went back to flying against the Vorthen. Vexler watched these things and felt something in his ancient consciousness shift. These humans knew what pain was. They understood what injury meant. They had access to medical knowledge that told them exactly how broken they were. And yet, they continued to fight. They continued to push. They continued to sacrifice because the goal mattered more than the cost. Henry Sutton worked in the communications center. The Vorthen was trying to jam all outgoing signals. They wanted to isolate the station, to prevent the humans from calling for help. Henry sat at his console and worked constantly to find frequencies the Vorthen had not blocked yet. One day, a Vorthen unit targeted the communications center directly. They sent warriors with heavy weapons to destroy the equipment and kill anyone inside. Henry saw them coming on the monitor. He saw their numbers. He knew what was about to happen. But the communications center was finally getting through to the outer colonies. Henry had just established a clear signal. The message was going out. Help was being called. The rescue that Victoria had gambled everything on was actually coming. Henry had a choice. He could abandon the center, run and hide, and try to survive. or he could stay and keep the signal active. But he could not do both. He stayed at his console. He kept the equipment running. He sent the final message that would bring rescue. And when the Vorthen entered the communication center, they found Henry Sutton at his post. They shot him. They disabled the equipment. But the message had gone through. The outer colonies had received it. Help was coming. Olivia Martin was different from the others. She was a scientist, trained in the study of geology and minerals, not in combat or survival tactics. But she had become important to the war effort because her knowledge was specific and precise. She developed new compounds from the station's minerals. She discovered chemical combinations that could harm the Vorthen or disable their equipment. She worked in a makeshift laboratory deep beneath the station, surrounded by the elements she had studied so carefully. When a Vorthen search team found her location, she could have run. She could have hidden. Instead, she chose to stay. She activated every compound she had created. She created a chemical reaction that was powerful and poisonous and would kill anything that came through that laboratory door. The Vorthen team was stopped. They could not advance. But Olivia was still in the laboratory when the reaction started. She was burned by the chemicals she had created. She was poisoned by the very thing she had developed to stop the enemy. Christine saved her. She pulled Olivia from the laboratory. She gave her medications and treatments that kept her alive. But Olivia's hands were damaged. The skin was burned away. The nerves were destroyed. She would never work with chemicals again the way she had before. When Olivia woke up, her first question was also about the battle. Her sacrifice had worked. The Vorthen could not advance through her section, could not reach the residential areas where the children and families were sheltering. Had bought time for more survivors to be evacuated. Good, Olivia said, and she closed her eyes and went back to sleep. Marcus Webb learned to think like a saboteur. He was an engineer, trained to build and repair, but he became skilled at destroying. He learned where the weak points were in Vorthen equipment. He learned how to make machines fail in ways that would give humans advantage. He led teams through the tunnels. He placed charges. He cut power lines. He flooded sections and collapsed structures. He became a phantom in the station's depths, everywhere and nowhere at once. The Vorthen could not find him. The Vorthen could not stop him. But they could trap him. One day, Marcus found his escape route sealed. The tunnels he had planned to use for retreat were blocked by Vorthen advance teams. He was surrounded. His team was scattered. He was alone in a section of maintenance tunnels that was slowly filling with toxic gas from a ruptured line. He could have called for help. He could have asked Victoria for rescue. Instead, he activated the charges he had placed in that section. He brought down the tunnels. He trapped the Vorthen team that had cornered him. 12 Vorthen warriors died, and Marcus Webb was buried beneath stone and metal, suffocated by the very poison he had released. His body was never recovered. But his action had saved 300 humans who were in the residential sectors beyond that section, by the second week of the siege. The pattern was clear to Wexler. Humans were going to die. That was not the question. The question was what they would accomplish with their deaths. How many enemies they could take with them. How many innocents they could protect. What meaning they could create from their sacrifice. The Vorthen were becoming fewer in number. The humans were becoming fewer in number, but the humans were not giving up. They were not surrendering to the obvious fact that they could not win. They were continuing to fight because the goal was not to win in the way the Vorthen understood it. The goal was to protect, to ensure survival of the innocent, to mean something. And Wexler began to understand why the gods feared such creatures. Why even beings of immense power found themselves unsettled by this species that would choose death before allowing harm to come to those they protected. Because there was no way to counter that. No way to defeat something that did not fear death itself. Vexler had lived for 3,000 years. He had seen civilizations rise from nothing and fall into dust. He had watched species destroy themselves through war, greed, and foolishness. His mind was vast and ancient. His body was made of crystal that could hold power beyond what any normal creature could understand. To call him a god would be correct. He was one of the ascended, the highest level of being in the galaxy. But even gods got assignments. The message came from the Galactic Council through a being called an Eternal. This Eternal rarely spoke to those beneath them. The task was simple: watch the humans. A young species called Earth had recently learned to travel between stars. The Council wanted to know if they could be trusted with more power. Could they join the greater community of galactic species? Or would they destroy themselves and everyone around them? Vexler had to find out the answer. He shaped his body into a human form. His true nature was too powerful, too strange for humans to handle. Humans could not see things the way the Ascended did. They were limited. They needed things to look normal, to make sense to their small minds. So Vexler became tall, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to hold centuries of knowledge. He wore clothes that humans wore. He learned how to move like them, how to speak like them, how to pretend to be what he was not. The space station around Earth was called Station 7. Commander Victoria Walsh controlled the station. She was a woman in her 50 years, with gray hair cut short and intelligent eyes that looked at Vexler without fear. She did not understand what he truly was. The reports told her only that an observer from the Ascended would study her people. "We are honored," Victoria said, and she put out her hand to touch his. Vexler shook her hand. This was what humans did: touch and greeting. Small ritual that meant nothing to him, but everything to them. "I am here to learn about your species," Vexler said in the common language. His voice was smooth and calm. "The Council wishes to understand if humanity is ready to join the galactic community." Victoria smiled. She did not know that her smile meant nothing to Vexler. He did not feel the warmth of it. He did not connect to it in any way that mattered. But he had learned that humans expected smiles to be met with smiles. "Our people are strong," Victoria said. "We work hard. We protect each other. We want to be part of the greater galaxy." Vexler listened. He had heard this from every species. They all wanted to be part of something greater. They all believed they deserved respect. And most of the time, they were wrong. Most species were aggressive, selfish, and violent. They took what they wanted and destroyed what they did not need. Humans were the same. Vexler was certain. They simply had not yet revealed their true nature. He was sent to different parts of the station. He watched humans work in the factories that made weapons and tools. He observed them in their rest areas, where they ate and drank together. He studied them in their learning centers, where they taught young humans to read and think and build. Nothing he saw impressed him. They were small and weak. Their bodies broke easily. They could not see in the dark. They could not survive in the vacuum of space without machines. They got sick from simple infections. They tired after only a few hours of work. Their minds were clever, but their bodies were failures. Victoria invited Vexler to eat with her one evening. Humans ate together as a form of social bonding. Vexler did not need food. His body was crystal and energy. But he had learned that eating with humans was important to them. It meant trust. It meant acceptance. "Tell me," Victoria said, "what does the Council think of us?" Vexler did not lie, but he did not tell the complete truth either. "The Council is interested in learning more. That is why I am here. Will we pass this test?" Victoria asked. She was direct. Vexler appreciated that. Many species wasted time with false conversation. Humans did that too sometimes, but Victoria preferred to address things directly. "That depends on what you mean by pass," Vexler said. If you ask whether humans can survive in the galaxy, the answer is yes. You have basic technology. You have capacity for learning. You will not be destroyed. But will we be accepted? Victoria pressed. Vexler looked at her. Her eyes held something he could not quite name. It was not fear. It was not hope, though humans called it that. It was something stronger. It was a need to prove something to herself and her people. I do not know, Vexler said. The Council makes decisions based on information. I will gather that information. But I will tell you this, Commander. Every species in the galactic community began where you are now. Uncertain, struggling, hoping to be accepted. Most of them learned to work within the system. Some of them became important. Most of them simply survived. Victoria nodded. And what do you think humans will do? Vexler had not expected the question. He considered his answer carefully. I think humanity will do what all species do. You will try to survive. You will try to grow. You will try to matter. Whether you succeed depends on whether you are willing to do what needs to be done. And what needs to be done? Victoria asked. I do not know, Vexler admitted. Not yet. 3 weeks after this conversation, everything changed. Alarms filled the station. Red lights flashed in every corridor. Vexler felt the station shake as impacts struck its hull. He moved to the observation window and saw the attack fleet. They were called the Vorthan Collective. They were not new to Vexler. He had observed them before. They were large creatures with hard shells and many limbs. They conquered planets and took resources. They killed anything that resisted them. They were brutal and efficient and completely without mercy. And they had come for Kepler Station. Victoria's voice came through the communication system. All personnel, this is command. We are under attack. Go to your stations. Seal all doors. This is not a drill. The humans around Vexler moved quickly. They knew what to do. They had practiced for situations like this. They went to their stations. They took up weapons. They prepared to defend. Vexler stood at the window and watched the Vorthan ships approach. He counted the attacking vessels. He counted the Vorthan warriors. He ran the calculations in his ancient mind. The humans could not win this fight. There were 1,200 humans on the station. There were 3,000 Vorthan warriors attacking from above. The Vorthan had superior weapons. They had superior bodies. The humans had only training and determination. And those things were not enough against such odds. In 3 hours, maybe 4. Everyone on this station would be dead. Vexler felt something strange move through his consciousness. It was not fear. Gods did not fear. But it was close to fear. It was a kind of concern. A kind of question about what he was witnessing. Victoria appeared in the corridor. She was moving toward the command center. She saw Vexler and stopped. We need your help, she said. You have power we do not have. Fight with us. Help us survive. Vexler looked at her. She was asking him to risk himself for a species he did not care about. She was asking him to fight alongside creatures he considered inferior. She was asking him to choose their side, not as an observer, but as a participant. In 3,000 years of existence, Vexler had never been asked such a thing. The Vorthan will destroy you, he said. It was the truth. Maybe, Victoria said. But we will not go down without a fight. Will you help us? Vexler did not answer immediately. He looked at Victoria's face. Her jaw was set. Her eyes were clear. She was afraid, but she did not let the fear control her. She did not accept defeat. And in that moment, Vexler made a choice that would change everything. Yes, he said. I will fight with you. He did not know then that this choice would teach him what it meant to be afraid of something. He did not know that humans would show him a strength that made his godlike power seem small and limited. He did not know that he would spend the rest of his existence understanding why even gods had reason to fear the will of humans, but he was about to learn. The command center became Victoria's war room. Screens showed the approach of the Vorthen fleet. Red lines traced their path toward the station. Numbers and symbols tracked their distance and speed. Everything was organized and cold and factual. Humans were going to die. The numbers showed this clearly. Victoria gathered 7 people around the main table. There was Captain Ryan Hayes, the military commander of the station. He had trained for combat his entire life and carried himself with the confidence of someone who had fought before. Dr. Olivia Martin was a scientist who studied rocks and minerals. Her hands were calloused from field work. Marcus Webb was an engineer who built and fixed machines. Christine Park was a doctor who kept humans alive when they were broken or sick. Henry Sutton handled communications. Patricia Brown worked in maintenance and knew every tunnel and passage in the station. James Cooper was a pilot who flew the small ships that moved cargo and people. They were 7 ordinary humans. They looked at Victoria and waited for her to give them orders. The Vorthen outnumber us roughly 2 to 1, Victoria said. Their weapons are superior to ours. Their armor is stronger. By every calculation, we lose this fight. No one argued with her. They could see the numbers on the screens. They knew what those numbers meant. But we have advantages they do not have, Victoria continued. We know this station. We have lived here. We understand how it works. They do not. The question is whether we can turn that knowledge into something useful. Whether we can survive long enough for rescue to arrive. Ryan leaned forward. His face was hard and serious. You want us to think of strategies, to find ways to slow them down. Yes, Victoria said. And more than that. I want you to give me ideas for how we turn this place into a weapon they cannot handle. I want unconventional thinking. I want solutions that do not look like normal military tactics. Because normal tactics will get us killed. Marcus spoke first. The tunnels, he said. We have miles of maintenance tunnels beneath the station. Most of them are not on the station's public maps. The Vorthen will not know they exist. Olivia nodded. The mineral composition of the asteroid, she added. We have surveys from the mining operations. I know where the unstable sections are. We could cause collapses. We could trap them in certain areas. One by one, the 7 people began to think. They began to plan. They began to consider how they could use what they knew against an enemy that was stronger, but ignorant. Vexler watched this process with interest. He was still observing, even now. Even in the moment of crisis, part of his ancient mind continued to catalog what he saw. Humans did not panic. They did not surrender to fear. Instead, they divided the problem into pieces they could understand and handle. Over the next hours, a plan formed. The Vorthen attack came hard and fast. Their landing craft burned through the station's atmosphere and crashed through the outer sections. Their warriors poured out, heavily armed and eager for combat. They expected the humans to hide. They expected the humans to surrender. They expected simple resistance that they could crush quickly. Instead, they found a station that was empty. The humans were not waiting in their usual positions. They were not in the barracks or the factories or the command center. They were gone, hidden away in places the Vorthen could not find them. The Vorthen commander was called Thrall Vex. He was large even for his kind, with a hard exoskeleton that had survived many battles. He led his warriors deeper into the station, searching for the humans who should have been there to fight. But as the Vorthen pushed forward, things began to happen. Marcus and Patricia led teams of humans through the maintenance tunnels. They knew exactly where to go. They moved through the darkness like water finding its path. And as they moved, they began to dismantle the station's systems. The power lines that fed the Vorthan transport vehicles were disabled. The Vorthan warriors found their ships would not start. They were stuck on the station now, unable to retreat, unable to bring in reinforcements. The cooling systems that maintained the right temperature for the Vorthan's biology were partially shut down. The Vorthan had to wear environmental suits or suffer extreme discomfort. It slowed them down. It made them tired. It made them make mistakes. Water lines were redirected. The Vorthan discovered that certain corridors that had been dry were now flooded. They had to find alternate routes the humans had predicted. Routes where other traps waited. Olivia had studied her minerals well. She worked with Christine and Henry to use the station's mining equipment in ways it was never designed for. They broke compounds from the asteroid's rock. Simple chemistry. Basic mixing of elements. Nothing complicated. But when those compounds were released into the corridors where the Vorthan advanced, the effect was devastating. Not lethal, not quite, but painful and disorienting. The Vorthan's sensory organs could not handle the chemical assault. They became confused. They became angry. And they made more mistakes. James Cooper began his campaign in the skies above the station. He flew one of the small personnel shuttles. It was not built for combat. It was made to carry people and supplies. But James was a pilot, and a pilot could make machines do things their designers never intended. He attacked the Vorthan supply lines. He harassed their landing craft. He drew their fire and then disappeared into the station's blind spots before they could return fire with accuracy. The Vorthan began to realize they were not fighting an army. They were fighting a machine. They were fighting a station that had turned against them. And they were fighting it with weapons and tactics that did not work in this environment. Thralvex called for reinforcements. But the reinforcements would take time. He called for orbital support. But the humans had learned to jam certain communications frequencies. The Vorthan leadership outside the station could not hear him clearly. The messages that did get through were confused and unclear. Days passed. The Vorthan controlled most of the station, but they could not control all of it. Pockets of human resistance remained. Every time the Vorthan tried to advance, something terrible happened. A floor collapsed beneath them. A section flooded with poisonous gas. A corridor filled with fire from a ruptured fuel line that humans had deliberately damaged. Victoria remained in a hidden command post with Vexler. She watched the screens that showed the battles throughout the station. She saw her people fighting and surviving and dying. She saw the Vorthan become more frustrated and more desperate. "They are learning," Vexler said. "The Vorthan are adapting to your tactics. This cannot continue indefinitely." Victoria nodded. Her face was gray with exhaustion. "I know," she said. "But every day we survive is a day closer to rescue. Every Vorthan we delay is a Vorthan that cannot invade another colony. This station was always going to be lost. I accepted that the moment they attacked. Now I am focused on making sure that loss cost them something. I am focused on making sure the survivors are the ones who matter." Vexler did not fully understand what she meant by that. But he would learn. He would learn very quickly what humans meant when they talked about sacrifice and duty and protecting those who could not protect themselves. The first human. Death came on the 5th day of the siege. A maintenance tunnel collapsed while Patricia Brown was inside it. She had been there deliberately, installing charges that would bring down a larger section of the tunnel, hoping to trap a group of advancing Vorthan. The charges detonated earlier than planned. The tunnel came down on top of her dot. Her team called for rescue. But Victoria made a decision. She locked down the tunnel further. She sealed it. She prevented the rescue that might have allowed more Vorthan to advance into the section behind. Patricia. Patricia Brown died alone in the darkness, crushed beneath stone and metal, so that her teammates could survive and continue to fight. Her last message, recorded on a communication unit that did not quite get buried, was simple and quiet. "Tell them I was proud," she said. "Tell them it was an honor." Vexler heard that message, and for the first time in 3,000 years, the god felt something that was very much like fear. The 15th day of the siege began like the others. Alarms, fighting in the corridors, the sound of weapons firing, the rumble of the station shifting and settling as Human and Vorthen struggled for control of different sections. But something was different. The communication center, though damaged, had finally re-established a clear signal. The rescue fleet was coming. It was still days away, but it was coming. The distress call had reached the Earth Alliance. Help was on the way. Victoria gathered the surviving leadership in the command center. Of the 7 she had started with, 4 remained: Ryan Hayes, Christine Park, James Cooper, and Victoria herself. The others were dead or missing or too injured to continue fighting. "We have to assume the Vorthen know about the rescue fleet," Victoria said. "They will know their time is limited. They will become desperate. Desperate enemies are dangerous enemies." Ryan nodded. He looked exhausted. His uniform was torn and stained. His left eye was swollen from an impact wound Christine had treated but could not fully heal. "They will push for a decisive blow," he said. "They will stop playing careful and start playing hard." "Yes," Victoria said. "Which means they will probably target the residential sections directly. They know that is where we keep the children. They know that we'll break our will to resist." Christine spoke quietly. "We cannot let that happen." "I know," Victoria said. "Which is why we are going to do something they will not expect. We are going to attack them." Everyone looked at her. Attack was not what humans had been doing. Humans had been defending, resisting, delaying. But the Vorthen had all the advantages in direct combat. Attack made no sense. "Explain," James said. "The Vorthen primary carrier is above the station," Victoria said. "It is the command center for their entire operation. If we can damage it badly enough, they will be forced to retreat. They will abandon the ground assault to save their ship." "The carrier is heavily defended," Ryan said. "We cannot reach it with ground weapons. We do not have the firepower." "No," Victoria said. "But we have pilots. We have people willing to fly ships directly into the carrier's docking bay and detonate them there." Silence filled the command center. "That is a suicide mission," Christine said finally. "Yes," Victoria said. "It is. I will not order anyone to do it. I am asking for volunteers." Ryan stood immediately. "I will do it." James stood a second later. "No," he said. "I am the better pilot. I should go." "You should both go," Victoria said. "You know the Vorthen tactics. You know how to approach the carrier without being intercepted. You will have a better chance of success together than either of you would alone." Ryan and James looked at each other. There was a moment of understanding between them. They both knew what Victoria was asking. They both knew what accepting meant. But they also knew what would happen if the Vorthen destroyed the residential sections. They knew the children who were sheltering there. Some of them had families. Some of them were friends. All of them deserved the chance to grow up and see a future beyond this battle. "We will need to steal a large transport," James said. "Something with enough cargo space to hold serious explosives." "Marcus prepared something," Victoria said. "It is waiting in the lower hangar. He made sure the Vorthen would not find it." Of course, Marcus had prepared something. Marcus was gone, but the systems he had created remained. The plans he had made were still working. The systems he had set up continued to function even after his death. Vexler watched. Ryan and James prepare for their final flight. They loaded weapons into the shuttle. They loaded explosives that Marcus had created and stockpiled. They loaded enough destructive force to seriously damage a Vorthan carrier. "Why do you do this?" Vexler asked James as they worked. "You know this ends with your death." James did not look up from his work. "Because they are still fighting," he said. "Because the residential sections still have civilians in them. Because Victoria needs this to work. Because I can do this thing and they cannot." "But you will die," Vexler said. "Yes," James said simply. "I will die. But the people in the residential sections will live. That is a fair trade." Vexler did not understand how it was a fair trade. How any death could equal the survival of those too weak to protect themselves. But he had been learning about humans. He had been learning that their mathematics of sacrifice did not work the same way as mathematics of power and survival worked. Ryan and James launched their shuttle from a hidden bay. The Vorthan did not expect the attack. They were focused on advancing into the residential sections. They did not see the shuttle until it was too late. The shuttle accelerated toward the Vorthan carrier. The carrier's defensive weapons activated. Fire erupted across the darkness. James flew with perfect precision, avoiding the incoming fire. Using the Vorthan's own destroyed ships as cover. Using the station itself as a shield against some of the worst attacks. Ryan worked the weapons console. He did not use weapons. Instead, he flooded the approach vector with false signals and interference, making it harder for the Vorthan targeting systems to track them. They made it through. The shuttle breached the Vorthan carrier's docking bay, and in that moment of entry, James and Ryan activated the detonation sequence. The explosion was enormous. It tore through the Vorthan carrier. It destroyed the docking section. It sent shockwaves throughout the entire vessel. The carrier began to list. Systems failed. The ship was crippled, and James and Ryan, still inside the shuttle, were incinerated by the blast. The Vorthan commander, Thralvex, had a decision to make. Stay and attempt to seize the station, or retreat and protect his damaged carrier. He could not do both. He chose to retreat. He gathered his remaining warriors. He abandoned the ground assault. He pulled his surviving soldiers back to his remaining ships. Within hours, the Vorthan fleet was moving away from the station, limping toward space where they could make repairs and regroup. The Vorthan did not withdraw because they were defeated. They withdrew because their mission had become impossible. And they had learned that humans could not be defeated through superior numbers or firepower alone. Humans had to be destroyed completely, and they had not brought the force necessary for complete destruction. Victoria stood in the command center and watched the Vorthan ships disappear into space. 1,200 humans had been on the station when the attack began. 872 of them were still alive. 328 were dead. Among them were Patricia Brown, Henry Sutton, Marcus Webb, Olivia Martin with her hands destroyed beyond recovery, James Cooper, Ryan Hayes. And 12 others whose names would be remembered in the memorial garden that humans always built after such conflicts. Christine Park worked for hours in the medical center, treating the injured and broken who remained. Humans could survive in ways that should have been impossible. She stitched wounds. She set broken bones. She gave medications. She did the work of keeping people alive even after the fighting stopped. Vexler stood alone in an observation window and looked out at the stars. He was no longer the observer. He had become a participant. He had fought alongside these small, fragile creatures, and he had learned something that no ancient text or collected knowledge had been able to teach him. Power was not what humans had. Will was not what made them strong. Knowledge was not their advantage. Their advantage was their willingness to die for something greater than themselves. their ability to find meaning in sacrifice, their capacity to love something more than they loved their own survival. And that, Vexler understood now, was why the gods feared them. Because there was no defense against creatures who did not fear death. There was no strategy against beings who would choose noble sacrifice over shameful survival. The Vorthen had vastly superior power, and they had still been defeated by a species that was younger, weaker, and less advanced, because humans fought with something that could not be quantified, or measured or analyzed in databases and calculations. They fought with purpose, and purpose was stronger than power. 3 weeks after the Vorthen withdrew, the rescue fleet arrived. Large ships with the Earth Alliance insignia descended toward Kepler Station. They brought medical teams and engineers. They brought supplies and support. They brought the official confirmation that the station could be saved and would be restored. The humans who had survived emerged from their shelters and hiding places. They looked at the rescue fleet with expressions that were complex: relief, grief, exhaustion, victory. All of these emotions existed in their faces at the same time, and none of them seemed contradictory to those who felt them. Vexler remained on the station. He did not depart with the Vorthen. He did not retreat to safety. He stayed to witness the aftermath of what had happened here. On the day of the memorial, they gathered in what had once been a recreation area. The Vorthen had damaged it, and the humans had cleaned it up. Now it held 8 memorial stones, 8 names carved into them. 8 people who would not be going home. Patricia Brown, Henry Sutton, Marcus Webb, Olivia Martin, James Cooper, Ryan Hayes, and 2 others whose names Vexler had learned but whose sacrifices were no less significant than those of the famous ones. Victoria Walsh stood before the memorial. She was cleaner now. She had rested, but her eyes held something that had not been there before the siege. A knowledge, an understanding of what humans were truly capable of, what they were willing to give. She saw Vexler standing apart from the others and gestured for him to come forward. "Thank you," she said when he stood beside her. "For what?" Vexler asked. "I did not save your people. Your people saved themselves." "For staying," Victoria said. "For fighting with us instead of standing apart. For seeing us not as inferior creatures to be observed, but as allies worthy of respect." Vexler did not know how to respond to this. In 3,000 years of existence, he had not received gratitude. Gods did not receive gratitude. They received fear. They received respect. They received awe. But gratitude implied that he had given something precious to them, implied that his presence mattered in a way that transcended his power. The Galactic Council called Vexler back 3 months later. He was to report his findings. They wanted to know whether humanity should be admitted to the greater galactic community. His observation was complete. It was time for his final assessment. Vexler traveled to the Council station, a massive construct that orbited a dying star. The Council chamber was vast and austere. Ethereal beings of pure energy and crystal and forms that had no name gathered to hear his report. An Eternal who spoke with the voice of the entire Council addressed him. "Vexler, you have completed your observation of the human species. What is your recommendation?" Vexler stood before them and spoke the truth that had been forming in his consciousness since the moment he chose to fight alongside Victoria and her people. "I recommend immediate acceptance of humanity into the galactic community," he said. "I recommend that all protections be extended to them, and I recommend that we approach them with extreme caution." The Council chamber filled with surprise and confusion. Such a recommendation was unusual. The human species had been expected to fail assessment. Their acceptance was not predicted. Their elevation was not calculated in any probability matrix. "Explain your reasoning," the Eternal said. "Because they will become great. Wexler said. Not through superior technology or advanced weaponry, but through something we have lost or never possessed. They will become great through their capacity to sacrifice for others. They will become great through their willingness to die for meaning. They will become great because they do not accept defeat when others need them to succeed. This is not a rational assessment, another member of the council said. Willingness to sacrifice does not equate to military capability or advanced civilization. No, Wexler agreed. It does not. But it makes them unpredictable in ways that no calculation can anticipate. The Vorthen attacked Kepler Station, expecting a simple victory. They had vastly superior numbers. They had superior weapons. They had the advantage in every measurable way. And they were forced to retreat by a species half their population size and with technology centuries behind them. The Vorthen are not known for exceptional military capability, a council member said. The Vorthen are known for being competent, Wexler said. And they were defeated not because they lacked competence, but because humans fought with a different framework entirely. They did not fight to win. They fought to protect those who could not protect themselves. That goal made them willing to sacrifice in ways the Vorthen did not anticipate. That goal gave them the will to continue fighting even when defeat seemed inevitable. The council chamber was silent for a long moment. Are you suggesting humans are superior to the Ascended? An Eternal asked, skepticism heavy in its voice. No, Wexler said carefully. I am suggesting they possess a strength that our current frameworks do not account for. A strength born from their limitations rather than in spite of them. They are small and fragile, and that makes them focus on meaning and community rather than individual power. That trade-off creates something we cannot easily defend against. Then you are recommending we treat them as a threat? Another member asked. I am recommending we treat them as equals, Wexler said, with respect and caution, because their path is not our path, but that does not make it inferior to our path. It makes it fundamentally different, and different is often more dangerous than weak or strong. The Galactic Council voted. The decision was close, but Wexler's recommendation was accepted. Humanity would be admitted to the galactic community. Their world would be protected under galactic law. Their people would have access to knowledge and trade, and the benefits of being part of something greater. Years passed. Wexler was promoted despite his recommendation, because the council valued his perspective, even when they disagreed with his conclusions. He continued to observe. He continued to learn, and he watched as humans spread across the galaxy. They did not conquer. They did not dominate. But they did something far more interesting. They changed the nature of galactic civilization. They created alliances based on mutual respect rather than dominance. They built communities where species of different kinds could live together and work together. They spread their philosophy of protecting the weak and sacrificing for the innocent across the galaxy. Species began to follow their example. The Vorthen eventually were reformed by contact with human culture. The collective became less of an aggressive power and more of a civilization focused on building rather than taking. Decades after the siege, Wexler encountered Victoria again. She had become an ambassador for the human species. She was older, her hair entirely gray, but her eyes held the same clarity that had first struck him during the siege. They met in a formal setting on a neutral station. Victoria extended her hand in the human greeting that Wexler had come to understand. I heard you fought for us in the council, she said. That you recommended us for acceptance. I did, Wexler said. They shook hands, the ancient ritual of connection. I never thanked you properly, Victoria said, for fighting alongside us at Kepler Station, for believing we could matter, for being willing to risk yourself when you could have simply observed. You did not need my belief, Wexler said. You needed only to show the truth of what you were. That you showed me was enough." Victoria smiled. "The thing about humans is that we terrify ourselves as much as we terrify gods," she said. "We know what we are capable of sacrificing. We know what we can endure. And sometimes that knowledge is more frightening than any external threat." "Is that why you teach this philosophy to other species?" Vexler asked. "We teach it because it is the only way for civilization to survive long term," Victoria said. "Power without purpose destroys itself. Technology without ethics collapses under its own weight. Only meaning and sacrifice and love for something beyond ourselves can build something lasting." Vexler considered this. He thought about the 3,000 years he had lived before meeting Victoria. He thought about the endless cycles of civilization rising and falling. He thought about the futility that had haunted his existence. "You have changed the galaxy," he said finally. "No," Victoria said. "We showed the galaxy what it could become if it chose a different path. Whether it accepts that invitation is up to each species. Whether it chooses sacrifice over domination. Whether it chooses meaning over power. That is not our choice to make for them." Vexler returned to his duties with a new understanding. He began to write reports that were different from his earlier analysis. He began to recommend acceptance for species that showed signs of the human philosophy. He began to subtly shift the direction of galactic civilization itself toward the values that humans had brought with them. It took centuries. But slowly, the galaxy changed. It became a place where sacrifice was honored, where protecting the weak was seen as strength rather than weakness, where meaning mattered more than power. And at the center of it all was the memory of 8 humans who had died at Kepler Station. Patricia Brown, Henry Sutton, Marcus Webb, Olivia Martin, James Cooper, Ryan Hayes, and 2 others. Their memorial stones stood in memorial gardens on 100 worlds. Their names were taught to young people as examples of what courage truly meant.